I am Lotte Anker. I don't know if you know, but I've been instructor at the improvisation course, the workshop here during Mixtur, and we had a concert in the morning. Oh, you were at it? Yeah. Okay. And so in this lecture, I'll talk about, it's okay. We are just talking about students always being late. But I'll talk a little bit about my own practice and how my approach to improvisation as a musician, as a performer. Besides being that, I have also been composed for many years. Been composing mostly for, how can I say, in the start it was mostly for more like modern jazz bands, but then since I went into more and more free improvising, the composing also followed that in a way. And there are some questions, even though I have been practicing many years, there are certain questions that keep appearing in my head, especially in terms of composition and improvisation and composed material for improvisers. And it has a lot to do with how can we as composers make frames that that allow as much free improvising as possible. This I go deeper into that. But first, if I should say something about my own practice as an improviser, it's typically in smaller groups. You know, everything from solo to up to quartet, quintet. In my opinion, free improvised, I mean completely free without having any predetermined material, works really well. Of course, if the group can communicate. And in these situations, I've often, from time to time, experienced that certain frames or pre-composed material can actually be inhibiting. It can make the music smaller instead of extending it. And that's of course annoying, or maybe it was because we didn't do it well enough, I'm not sure about that. So when I compose for improvisers, it's mostly in larger groups. That makes more sense for me, because in larger groups, free improvisation can of course be more difficult because you have so many players suddenly to relate to. For me, no, first I can say there are, of course, there are multiple approaches to improvisation, and different musicians have different ways of both understanding it but also practicing it. From my perspective, improvisation and composition is two different, it's not opposites, it's not a dichotomy, it's two different ways of creating music, you could say. And in my own practice, these two ways of working, when I'm working as an improviser, performer, rehearsing with myself, that's also a way of composing. And when I'm composing for others, I might draw on inspirations and especially the overall aesthetics which are coming from my experiences as an improviser. So these, you could say, it's very entangled, intertwined, and I have also noticed that, let's say, I came into improvisation via free jazz, where it's all about be free, whatever that means, which we can discuss later. And then I gradually also came into a scene of improvisers which is more connected to aesthetically, you could say, to new music and all kinds of experimental music. So the jazz element is not so strong. It can be the instrumentation is maybe not necessarily with a rhythm section, and the thing that free jazz can have is that you establish some kind of groove, bass and drums, and they are working there, and then as a saxophone player you can just, you are free to play all your solo stuff and long narratives. But the other part of, or another section of the improvised scene is, as I said, more connected to, aesthetically, to new music. And then there are other scenes who are connected to rock music maybe, or electronic music, or folk music. So that's, there can be many different stylistic references. And that leads me to say that improvisation is not a style, it's a way of, it's a practice. I don't know if there might be people who don't agree with that, but so I've written a little bit about what I love about improvisation in small group, what it is, what the qualities are for me, and that's both on a musical level, of course, but there are also certain ethical or human qualities that I really appreciate. So it gives me the possibility to explore and discover and define my own music. The possibility of being surprised by the other musicians, our music, and sometimes surprising myself. It makes me a far better listener. It can offer a more direct access, you could say, to my subconscious musical ideas that could maybe develop into material. And then, I also, I really enjoy creating music and performing together with other musicians, and having the feeling that we are sculpting a piece in the now. Then I think there are some very interesting dynamics, you could also call it a paradox, between discipline and freedom. That can, that's, I mean, from a personal experience, that can sometimes be really beautiful, but it can also be frustrating. And when I say discipline, it's not only about discipline when you are working with your instrument, it's also, let's say we have a composed that there are some structures that we somehow have to follow or not follow. What free improvising in a small group can do, I guess also in other groups or chamber orchestras, how can I say, I really cherish the there should be a basic mutual trust in each other, which also means that if you take a risk, if the music is out there where you suddenly don't know, this could be fantastic, but this can also collapse totally, that you dare to do that, and that demands that there is a trust between the performers, and there should also be a mutual respect to each other and each other's ideas. Let's say a musician is playing something which I really maybe don't like, or I have no idea how I should relate to that, then I still need to have the respect for that. Then I can choose either not to play or try to see if I can transform it in some way. But those are like quite basic, how can I say, human qualities. I think it's important to have in a group. Then there can be in an improvising small group, a lot of experiences that the musicians experience as magic or mysterious. And that has to do with our common energy if we are playing, developing material. If it's a good concert or rehearsal session, it could happen that the music kind of takes over, and which also means that you kind of let go of your whatever ego or whatever plans you might have had, and then you are in that now. It's kind of a transcend or an experience of transcendence, without being. This is not religious or anything, but it's just the fact that the music kind of suddenly plays itself and takes you somewhere, and also that the experience that you just have to go there, and it might also change what you are doing, of course, with your own instrument, and that kind of heightened awareness that can be in a free improvised group also means that you can. I see there are some musicians here. They might know the experience of maybe something very intense has been going on, and for some reason it suddenly stopped, and everybody agreed intuitively about now it's over. There were no cues, there were not anything. It's just a feeling, even in the most dense, how can I say, energetic passages of music. So that's also that kind of magic or mystery that I really love. Anyway, about the composing, all these qualities I've said now, I wanted to see if I could get into composing for improvisers. And because it came out of some experiences with a larger group and composed material where every time there was some predetermined, pre-composed, it tended to be a little stiff. So sometimes I felt it was not really being one thing. And then I got the opportunity to apply for a small research project up in Copenhagen from the Rhythmic Conservatory. And I got the funding. And then I made this project, which is Sculpting Air in the Subhabitat. The Subhabitat is the name of the group I've been working with, and the texture and form in composition for larger ensemble of improvisers. It just means that my starting point was timbre and texture. There could also be other focus areas, but in this case, I went from actually using my own instrument as a way to inspire myself and then conceptualize a certain sonic idea or a small piece of texture or a timbre quality, conceptualize that into something I'll show later, which would be the basic material for the ensemble. So this is the Subhabitat ensemble. It's me. Martin Kerbash is a Berlin trumpet player who has it's actually him on the picture. I don't know if can you see these things? He nearly plays trumpet as a percussion instrument. So he's having a lot of additional objects and way of playing with them, which you'll hear later. Then Katja Hernandez is an American violin player. She's living in Stockholm at the moment, and a great improviser. Nina De Heli is originally from Switzerland, but also living in Sweden since many years. Andrea Neumann is Berlin-based. She has an instrument which you will also see, which is a custom-made, like inside piano frame. Like I cannot open this, but if you have the piano frame, it's of course much smaller because she's traveling with it. So it's not as big as a grand piano frame, but it's a little. It still has this form, and then it's amplified, and she also plays it with on it with different objects, and she has some electronics possibilities also. And Sten Sandell is a Swedish piano player, and he also sings. Mostly like more throat singing and, how can I say, sounds. And Burkhard Weins is also from Berlin and is playing drums, percussion and objects. Then there was supposed to be some guests in this project so we could expand the group, but it started in 2020, just before the first lockdown. So it has been very fragmented, and it was supposed to take 1 year, and it took way more than 2 years, or a little more than 2 years. It's actually not quite finished yet. Yeah, this is Andrea's instrument up there, and then it's just to have some some picture material. And this is just the group in a waiting situation, which looks a little boring. Yeah, so I'll try to go through this a little fast. When I first started, I looked at my notes and I wrote something, you know, and looked at notebooks, and so there were certain things. What am I looking for in this project? And the first group here is about certain timbre qualities, and also qualities about timbre and sound behaves, like changing sound surfaces, tactility of course, and texture, because the title was texture, emphasizing color, not pitch, but pitch is allowed, zooming into micro details, subtlety, noise, silence, and many silences, vibrating, it's also about surfaces and making it alive. Instability and fragility, resistance, that's very basic actually, some of them. Inaudible or blurred structures and contours. This group is working with noise also as individual musicians, and in the structures I made, I was interested in blurring them so they were not so clear. So you could say, in a way, it got more texturalized. It could be like a painter who is doing something very clear, but you know, afterwards you want to make it a little more mysterious in a way, or maybe give it more depth. Anyway, and then underneath, those are some of the balance between predefined and undefined elements in a composition. How can I do that? The beautiful paradox, frustrating could also be, dynamics between freedom and discipline, how much and when. And is it a paradox? That's just a rhetoric thing. I don't think it's a paradox. Or, you know, it depends. Does the predefined elements inhibit, get in the way, or can it help transcend the music? When and how? And then there's something about the role I have as a composer and a performer. There are different issues, you could say, that I also wanted to look at. This is just, I just go through it fast. I was asking myself, what is the difference between texture and structure in music? And then I looked it up, and with these quotes from the dictionary and this Oxford handbook, what I'm looking at are these words: quality, timbre, material, tactile. It's texture. You could say is about. It has that tactile quality in it, which structure don't have. And then there's also a quote from George Ligeti. He's talking about this mass where you cannot identify every single sound. And then I also asked a good friend of mine who is a visual artist how she looked at that. And she said this is what she has learned at the Arts Academy. The texture is a quality of something that is in the structure. The structure can hold or carry what is the texture. I guess I came to think about our body, that we have a skeleton, which is the structure, and within that there are tissues and smaller stuff, fluids that keep it together. And then these are just examples of some of the modes these conceptualizations are made, which is the substance of a score. And some who have been in the improvisation class knows them a little bit. So first it has a title, of course, and then there are different suggestions to how it can be performed. And this is still very, very sparse. It's not. My idea was that all the details will work out in the group. So I'm not, and it's only suggestions. And I'll say some of the subcategories here are also being developed through rehearsing in the group. Saying like the flickering light was coming directly out of a way I have playing soprano saxophone, which are some a little bit uncontrollable flickering texture. And then there are different ways or different type silencers, because that was another element I was interested in. And then there is noise, which we worked a lot with on our first rehearsal, and but since everybody are in a way already working with noise, to make a noise group, it felt actually a little outdated. But what we did was finding ways to, well, I already had this, like there could be pure noise with no audible pitch, or filtered noise with an audible but very unstable pitch. And then we worked out the two versions where there was the serial, like now I'm talking as a saxophone player, or noise with more friction, which we has a master of friction noise here in the audience. And then there were layered noise, and then there are some, those are more related to the actual material, like wood, metals, and tutti bowing is, the whole group is bowing something with violin or small cello bows. Well, we can come back to some of these. Maybe I should just say very short. When I'm formulating these instructions, I actually try to do it as in an as neutral language as possible, because so I don't use a lot of metaphors or imagine a lake in the woods and it's nice and full moon, night and full moon. It's not. I'm of course. That would be, I'm not interested in imposing my own imagination if I had that imagination on the musicians. So it's in that way it's very sparse, the instructions, and then we find our way to play it. I don't write how things should be played or what it should sound like in the end, because I don't know. And I avoid, I guess, also, too many. I already said that sonic metaphors, I think they can be okay, at least for me, to have as we had this flickering lights, things like that, which is just a headline, but I'm not filling in the instructions with a lot of metaphors. But since I worked them out on saxophone, but also imagining, I of course had a lot of my own imaginations, which created a lot of pictures and metaphors. And these are some of them written here in the notebook. And for me, that it definitely makes it more grounded, you could say. And since I also felt that in a way there was a paradox when, for me, that when the whole project was about tactility and senses and texture, timbre, then to just have these the black text, which is completely very non-sensual, that was a weird paradox. So for my own sake, I kept the notebook where I'm writing things like the one, the stuff in blue. And there have also been moments at rehearsals where I was happy I had them, because the musicians would actually ask, but what had you actually imagined? And then it's nice to have a grounded something. Not that they have to play what I'm imagining, but it can help certain things. And this is just some principle for how to work with these modes. Modes are spaces of possibilities to be explored, individualized and internalized. This one was internalized was important for me because I wanted the musicians to internalize it so much that if we were playing, that it felt like it's coming from the inside and not something that's on the score. And that takes time. And the modes are dynamic and can be developed continuously. It just means that, what it says, I can add stuff to it, and they can change, and some of them can fusion and so on. Each mode should be explored in terms of its potentials and possibilities: sonic, like instrumentation, playing technique; structural and expressive; mutability and variability. It means how much can you change, transform a certain mode concept. What is the possibilities inside a certain sound? It could also be. The modes can be treated, molded, morphed, etc. in multiple ways. It can be combined, juxtaposed, layered in multiple ways. They are plastic, fluid, so they can behave in all these ways. They can be carried out as a collective thing in the ensemble, but also in subgroups and even individually. The perception of the mode should always be discussed or negotiated in any ensemble. Maybe I should say something about the plastic fluid. When I started the project, I called it modules. And after a while, it annoyed me so much, the word, because it made me think of a kitchen, or building blocks for houses or things like that. And then there was a period where I called it fluid modules or liquid modules, I think, just to kind of suggest that this is not a fixed thing, but it's a living and moving thing. It's also inside each module or mode. But then in the end, I just decided on call it modes, which also emphasized that it's not the principles in itself that is the most important. It is how the ensemble plays it. And this is just an old score which has been used from 2020. So it's a little bit like just making for a concert, of course. So this is just this is not the score, because the score is also the modes and the work we do with them. But this is like the map for one concert. And the concerts we have made have typically been, or the process has typically been, we have rehearsed for some days, we have a concert in the subhabitat. I make a score quite fast on the basis of what we have been working with, and we play it. So it's some kind of, I can say, I don't know, lab concerts. Yeah. So, shall I go on? You want to ask if you have questions, but you can also ask later, because I forgot to say, I think we'll end with a kind of Q&A. Yeah?
Yeah, I was just wondering how compared to, say, a normal, completely composed piece, so to speak, the rehearsals work out, because if you have a song, you have 2 rehearsals and then the concert.
Yeah.
Is it similar? Can it work in a similar way, or do you need a lot more rehearsals to get to each other?
It depends. We have to, I mean, also because of lockdown, some of the rehearsals, some got pushed, of course, but so I could not do it as frequently as I had planned. But there were some. There were typically 2 days, and we would not work with all the modes. We would go deep into like fewer modes. And is that?
And then you had 2 whole days of working.
And we could sit with one, especially the sustain thing and some of the others. We have been sitting with for more than half an hour on the same stuff, just playing. Also to get into that kind of space where you are not just playing the material, but where you start to dive a little bit deeper into, and things starts to happen. So time is, I think time is a really...
you think about half an hour it took for each thing to dive deeper?
Yeah, well, this is just an example.
I'm just wondering how
long no, this is an example, and I must say it was very rewarding.
And then after that, you felt ready for the performance?
I mean, when are you ready? We are also improvisers, so it's, you know, everything can happen. And in some of the scores, I have even written free. I mean, there are places where there are non-notes. The score I showed you before was much more structured than the later ones. There were many, I'd say we went towards less elements, but more happening inside a mode, which was good for both the music and the group. I'll play a little bit of the start of a concert. Were there more questions, or can we? Okay.
I was wondering what is the purpose, or what are the purposes of the modes? Or, I mean, you have obviously developed some kind of thinking of certain, let's say, structures, textures, whatever. And why have you done that? Have you done that to, I don't know, understand maybe what you're interested in, or is it really a means to communicate to the musicians what broadly it is that you want? So, for instance, do you explain to them what a sustain is, and then you work on sustains? Something like
that? I only explain what sustain is if they don't know it. Okay. But now I work with a group who knew it right away.
Okay.
I mean, I must say all the musicians in this group have been working with this kind of music for a decade. But of course, this is another entry. This is another way of doing it than many others. So why did I do the modes? It's mostly when I've been working with large ensembles, as I said in the start. It's a way I've too many times experienced that you know, when we get over 6 or maybe even 5, there can be some form-wise, especially it can end up in just being one mass of that can become a little, both formless but also a little meaningless. And that's of course when you are improvising freely. You are listening in so many directions. You are listening inwards towards yourself. I mean, because you are creating something, but of course you are listening to yourself in the room, to yourself together with the other musicians, to our whole in the space, and I think I'm sure it can be larger groups who have worked a lot together could probably find a way, but when you have like 10 different people to connect to, that doesn't it just makes it much more difficult. And in the end, it can make all the music sound a little bit the same also. And in that way, I think these structures are helpful. And I also think that for a group like this, it created an aesthetic, what's this called? Cohesiveness. It means that it has it's held together. We are not just now these improvisers have different backgrounds, although we also have some of the same meeting place. But let's say you work with other people who have very different backgrounds. That can end up being, from an aesthetic point of view, maybe a big melting pot, which can be fun, but from a composer's perspective, you might want to have a little more direction in. And I would never make a piece where I used all the modes. I made some for another group or for a graphic score magazine that only used 3, but used them in different ways. So it's a mix of both structuring and also I'll say for me, and I also have an interview with one of the musicians, to get sometimes to get a little bit of resistance, to get something which is predetermined. Even though I said it can be inhibiting, but it can also be creative, or it can, first of all, make you an outset from which you would do other things than if you didn't have it. And it can, even though frustrating, because it is, you have to relate to whatever this thing is now. You know, when you close some doors, other doors open. So it forces you, invites you to go deeper into the possibilities you have. I think those are the things why I'm doing it. But the main thing is definitely the size of the group.
And so, what's the largest you'll get?
What?
How big can it get? How big can the group?
I don't know. I mean, this group was not that big, actually. We were 7 and in the core group, but it could get, super, very big. Many of the very big groups are conducted improvisation, which I've also done, but I wanted to avoid. I wanted to have a size where we didn't need to have that conductor center, but we could feel our own center.
When one of the scores is performed in a concert, did you use it again?
No.
Okay, so it's
Not so
one
far.
score
Not
for
so
one.
far. But there have been we ended up, I think in the research period, we have played 3 concerts, and then we have played some who were the same band, but it was not related to the research project. But we ended up, 4 concerts. We ended up for 3 of them to use the same mode as a start, which was the one called Silence, which you probably don't remember now, but I can play it. Shall I do that? So let's see here. It's just, it's a very long concert, so I just play like 5-6 minutes into it. This was just, yeah. Start. Oops. Oh, wait. Sorry about that. Shall we? I also wanted to play the ending. I have lots of other material, but if you want to listen to the ending of the piece,
Yes.
and then we can take a fast if there are more questions.
You said there was silence was a module. Can you quickly explain?
Cell and silence. Yeah.
Yes,
So
one.
the concept, the idea, we have done it in many different ways. There have been one concert where I played a certain multiphonic but this which is the same, sound cell. But I can also show you the note. See what it said. Then I have to find it here. There. So it's a sound duration between approximately 3 to 8 seconds. They played a very long cell now, but followed by silences with varying durations. And then you kind of stick to your cell in some way, but of course you can do things with it. But then we have also done versions where somebody was playing the silence, like a very fine whatever, maybe some electronics or a violin with some harmonics or so. Here will be a little bit of the ending, which is a little more wide. 15 minutes. There was also a lot of other things going on. But this, the ending was more open. A lot of the modes were used individually, and we hadn't thought so much about it, how it should end. Yeah.
I was curious about the social dynamics of, like, the different roles that you occupy. Like, say you impose a structure on a group of improvisers, because I guess for a composer to put in a section of improvisation in a composition, there could be some resistance depending on the ensemble. Like they might say, "Oh, but you're just being lazy" or something.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the case with your own group, but have you encountered a resistance when you impose a structure? And
For
how do you
with a
navigate?
certain classical, not only a mix of curiosity and resistance. Nobody have said that it was because I was lazy. But I mean, for this group, this is about the project, and the main work is what is happening at the rehearsals. And my project was also that I really wanted to hear what the musicians have to say and how, I mean, what they are proposing and all the discussions we have, because I would not ask a group of improvisers who really have improvising as one of their main practice. If I ask musicians like that, there's a reason for that, and that's because I want to hear them with what they play. Do you know what I mean? But if I ask some other musicians who are maybe not that experienced in improvising but can do it, then I might actually maybe give some more information. Yeah, definitely. Also like students, or it really depends who it is. But because you would not ask a group of musicians like these ones and just make a through composed score. Then you would ask somebody else. I don't even know if they read music. I know some of them do, but and I have worked with. I have had a project or a group there were some musicians, classical, new music musicians who they could improvise a little bit, or they could, but in another way. And then there were also improvisers, and in that group there were also, or in the score had also through composed parts, and so the drummer didn't read music at all. He made his own score, and after we had tried it and talked it through. And there was an electronics player. She doesn't read music either, but she just makes her notes, and she has a super good memory. So, and that's of course, it's also a balance. That was, I don't know if that was an answer to you. Yeah.
In this concert this morning, and in the piece, parts of the piece that we just listened to, there was some similar.
Yeah,
passages.
that's true. When I heard it now, I came to think about this morning, and I also. It was a little ending we put on, and it was my suggestion, I must admit. This morning, I think we had talked about in our score today that we would end with also this one, which is called Small Machines here, where you have a lot of flutes interlocking. But then, I don't know, maybe based on yesterday, I felt there could be a little tail, that it should not end there. It could be a little longer, but not so long that it got into new material.
Yeah.
So that's, in a way, it's coincidence, but maybe it's not a coincidence because there are many pieces are ending like that. I say, but of course you need to have a drummer who can, or some string players who can, if you want to have these high-pitched drum things.
Yeah, my question was that something you composed or not?
This ending?
This ending and the similarities.
Yeah, no, it was not composed.
ending.
I mean, of course we had probably, now I don't have the score from that concert, but I probably made a little graphic thing about the ending, but I have not told the drummer that it should end with bow on cymbal.
Okay.
So that happened. And
But something like
I think he has
fade out and drums stay and then drums end in pieces.
that was how it became.
That's how, okay.
Yeah.
It's not something that's
No.
subjective.
I didn't write drums have to end the piece. That's the improvisation thing. But actually, when you take it up, he actually also has attended. It has happened before, I would say, in this group.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a little pattern there, or a little habit.
I would have a question actually.
Sorry?
I'm curious about the concert tomorrow.
Yeah.
With Viviana.
Yeah.
If you did prepare and repeat in this way or completely different way, or you just didn't prepare?
Tomorrow it's going to be completely free. Well, I don't know if Diana and we will make some. I don't know. Maybe we'll talk about how to start, or maybe our position in space, because I could see from the photos that it's a beautiful space and we could be moving because we have moved the instrument, but I don't know yet. And I'll say it's always the thing. Also, if you have too many rules or things you have said, we should start like this, and it should, or we should end like this, or somewhere we should have this thing. Sometimes it just disappears, and if you are a bigger group, then all the trouble comes. If you have some rules, because some people might stick to the rules, but some others are not sticking to it, and that can create a confusion, and maybe be irritating for some people. Are we now playing after the rules? Are we not? If they are not doing it, then I'm not. I mean, that can be a little. It depends on the group, of course, but tomorrow we only two. I think it will be. I don't know. We'll do our best. But yeah, that it's a classic thing. This thing with having rules, and then people have different opinions about how much you should follow those rules or how you should follow them. So. Yeah. I have a really, it's a little boring, but you asked about something, what this composition, why I did it. And that I think I have answered. But for the written part of the research, I don't know if it will be in the text. And this is a little academic, so that's a little annoying. This has nothing with I want to do it, I'm inspired to do it. But I'm writing what is or what became a composition in this project. How can I understand it? Question mark. A negotiated relation between the score, the individuals, and the ensemble as a whole. It is the making of an environment and form structures which make possible the transformations of material and structures, which are the modes and the score map, and allows for disruptions and destabilization, emergence and emergent forms within the large form structure. And then I've also written, working with the modes generates aesthetic coherence in the music. The mode structures can create nice tensions between stability and instability, or the predetermined and the undetermined. But this sounds very boring.
Do you also compose in completely written out forms as well?
Without forms?
Completely written forms.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have. Well, I have.
I mean, I'm just wondering if you use modes to like the realization of compose using the modes for realization.
That could be. Some of the modes are inspired by previous music I have done, which was mostly composed, and then I conceptualize it. And in that way, it's free in some way to give to improvisers.
And so I'm wondering if you do the opposite, so you have some modes and you think writing this
That
form
could
and then
Yeah.
your ensemble and okay,
Yeah.
this person starts with this.
Yeah. I mean, you can do both, and I have. There are some students. There's a new trend at the Rhythmic Conservatory, which is about translating things, which it can be electronic music that they put into some kind of program, and suddenly they can see how it would look if it was notated. I think I'm not so much into these programs, and then they just write it out. And I must say, it's not. I could never do it. It's too non-imaginative for me. But that has been this with translating certain things into true composed music for acoustic instruments. For example, from electronic to acoustic. When that's it, I think I personally have been really inspired in starting to work with electronic musicians. Also for my instrument, it has changed my way of playing into much more away from the pitch melodic stuff to sounds that blend into electronic music. So
I'm curious about your point with the graphic score, because texture is a word that is used also in visual art. As you mentioned, the definition of texture for visual artists. But I don't know if you use graphic notation for the group, and if not, why?
yeah, that is because well, I like to draw, but I'm not a like drawing person in that way, or painting, sometimes it depends what nature the graphic score has, but I think it can be annoying as a musician, especially if I have to look at it carefully all the time, because in improvising small groups, it's so much about listening, and in the moment that I start to focus, this is also about senses. If I direct my focus a lot on a score, if it's true notated, maybe I remember, I have played it so much that I remember the things, but if I have to look at a lot of details, graphic, that I don't listen as well, and I don't think the group sometimes do. It depends, of course. It also depends on the graphics. But it's also because I found that text scores were so abstract that in a way it gave more freedom, like mind-wise, for the musicians. But if you have seen some of Barry Guy's scores, just to mention one, is he Irish? No, he's British. But he's living in Switzerland since many years. He's a double bass player, and he's also educated as an architect. And his scores are extremely beautiful, like huge things with lots of details and ways where you can, in a way, when I were inside the Sagrada Familia the other day, I suddenly thought, wow, I want to do a piece of music with this like this, like with all these lights and colors and small details. And his scores are I mean, they are graphic, but they are filled with details and small text bits and really beautiful.
Now you talked a lot about improvising and composing, and when you speak about composing, you speak about your way of composing. So the pieces and the.
So when could you say that?
When you spoke about composing,
Yeah.
You spoke about yourself as a composer,
Yeah.
your kind,
Yeah.
your way of composing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you also have some experiences, well, I'm sure, of playing compositions by others.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering how your way of playing, of improvising, and so on, how the whole improvisation composition.
It's not that I don't want. I mean, I'm still playing other people's music, both graphic scores but also through notated.
Yeah.
Not so much as I have done, but I think I must say, in many ways, the Western notation system for music is pretty amazing. Also the way there are a lot of things that where you have to find alternative ways now since the music is changing. But I think the logic in it is. That was not your question.
No, it's interesting anyway. No, I'm just wondering how does your way of improvising, for instance, change when you improvise music that is composed by others?
When I improvise music that is composed.
Is composed by others.
Yeah.
I mean, now you're talking about improvising music that is composed by you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's open in some sense, but it's composed in some other sense, you know. And I'm wondering how is your playing, your improvising changing, for instance, when you play
other people's music. If it's through notated, I don't improvise. Well, maybe I'm allowed to do certain things, colorings. But if it's more open scores like this, I think I have it the same way as, now we didn't hear that interview, but I actually, even though I can, as I said before, get annoyed if I have to, a graphic score can sometimes, the same with a running score, like electronic score, to have that timeline that's like, it takes some of my listening away. That said, a certain distance can also be good. I think when I've been playing other people's music where there was a possibility for improvising, we have been sitting in a group and finding out how should we improvise or how should we do this. Maybe I've also talked to the composer if he or she had said, how can you do blah blah, I'm doing some things and showing them, and then they say, okay, cool, or they say, not that sound, I don't want that sound, I don't know. And in the end, I'm just trying to fulfill what is the intention with the piece, of course. I think it's I've been very inspired by some of the new music composers, for instance, saxophone music, but also other music. I'm listening a lot to, maybe more than jazz. Well, definitely more than jazz. But it comes in waves. Yes.
So it's not that you're not. So you're working more in the timbre aspect of your instrument than the pitch one. You're trying to meld more with the other instruments, no? And so you don't focus on pitch. And if I don't understand. And also in the score you wrote that you have to work in this way, but anyway pitches are lowered, no? So what exactly you try to avoid about pitch?
I'm not trying to avoid pitch. It was just in this project, it was not a main thing. It was more the sound, the tactility, the timbre, colors.
Yeah,
That was my entry. Of course, I mean, I'm playing pitches and so are the others, and we are also listening to each other, but I haven't notated anything. But talking about the modes, it would be, I can see a lot of ways this could go. This could be combined with through composed passages in many ways, or they could be layered underneath or on top, or that I'm not against it at all.
No, I don't want to say, I don't think that you're against this.
Okay.
I just think that in this project now you're focusing a certain result, some result, and in this result, pitch is not the focus thing, no? But for example, other musical stuff like rhythm that is allowed, no? It's not allowed is a good word, but it's like more. I don't know what to say, but I think you understand. So because I feel this when I hear something or when I play, also now sometimes start the melody, and this change everything about perception. No?
It does.
I don't know what's about. I think it's related to this feeling about your project. I don't know your point of view of this.
With melodies having.
So when the pitch take the first role in music, no? So where's the point? I don't know.
No, I don't know either. I mean, I still like, I play with some musicians who are, it's still improvised, but it's more melodic oriented still. Yeah. Especially if there's chords and things. And I love melodies. Not all melodies, but I mean, so it's not, I'm not trying to avoid it.
No,
in general.
Just about this project.
Yeah. Okay, we can talk about it later.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if I understood it.
Maybe in relation to that, because you did say that you started to move away a little bit from pitch when you started to get more with electronic improvisers.
Yeah.
Then there's two possible perspectives on that. One is, okay, that's great, now we do this pitch. And the other consequence would be, why are the electronic people not able to play pitch? Is that something that you would, I mean...
No, but that's true.
What's your perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure a lot of electronic musicians can do that, and they do that. But maybe not so much the electronic musicians I played with, although that's not true. I played a lot with a Japanese, she's living in New York since many, Iko Imori. And she has actually, also in her solo stuff, she has more, a little bit naivistic melodies, but because of the sonic context is so interesting, it never becomes like naive in a flat way. I think small melodic fragments can have a lot of power in abstract music. And I didn't completely close the door to melodies and pitch. I'll never do that. Yeah. It was just, maybe it would be more true to say that my vocabulary got expanded. So it was not that I say I don't want to have anything to do with any melodic stuff anymore. And the start of this concert, when you heard that was just some, chord tremolos in the inside piano, which is not so often that kind of material have been played in that group, but it happened to be like, because she also has a piano background, classical piano background. So it can happen. And I'm not, there are some improvisers, especially first generation European improvisers, and maybe also some of the Americans who were much more ideologic about the music. There were many more principles about how to be really improvising and what you were allowed to do and what not. And there was definitely some movements who were against anything that was close to melodies. And I'm against, you could say, that kind of strict ideologies. I believe in, freedom in another way. That there shouldn't be anything that's not allowed, at least.
I'm interested in what you're saying about the, only half an hour of getting into the mode. And so I'm guessing each way that you get into the mode is different in each mode. I mean, each something that you surprised that you get from it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can describe some different states of mind or something that happened that is in the different kinds of modes.
You mean because of the long time we use in a mode, what it is that
get
happens?
some concentration or some kind of.
I think I've done it. I have. It has been a way of practice myself also. Not every day, not always, but staying in the same material for a very long time. Of course, I'm allowed to do small adjustments or changes, and it can become really boring. You can meet that now I don't have any more, and I'm tired of being here playing. But if you get over that thing, it's something with the mind. Suddenly you just let go of everything, and that some new stuff can actually happen.
And does that happen with does that happen in the same way with every mode, or then different modes lead to different results in that?
It's not all of them that might be so that we have not been sitting half an hour with every mode you saw. And I think some of them might be more, how can I say, it's not more easy, but they would be more inviting for doing that thing. Of course, all the sustain, that's just, one long meditation, but even some with the pulses and some of the others, we did it for a very long time. And then, of course, we also stopped and discussed what we had been doing, because we also stopped ourselves because we thought we were on the wrong track. And then we tried another. We talked about how we should maybe change it.
And they generally have the same process of beginning and then kind of boredom and nothing left and then heart. Do they have that same state?
No, I think the boredom I didn't I didn't experience so much in a group. It's much easier to experience when you are only yourself. So there would always, because we are more people coming in with material. But I think when you stay in the same thing so long time, it forces you to keep looking for new ways to do things or to play sounds, and maybe you would not have been pushed out to those limits if you hadn't stayed in it for so long. I guess that's quite logic in a way. And then staying in a thing for a long time is also creating that feeling of we are one group. There's also that kind of. It's not meditation, but of course it has. We are making our own space, musical, sonic space in some way, which is a nice energy to be able to do in the group, which you also can take with you on stage, and it can really lift things. When we succeed, it's not always.
I think, also because I guess you want to
Yes,
the concert.
yes, for sure.
We'll have some break time, and I'm sure she'll be happy to discuss up with you.
Yeah.
If you want us outside, I don't know.
Oh, who, me? Yeah, okay, I thought you were talking of me. Yeah, no. No, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we can end the session here. Thank you so much.
And I'll say thank you so much, and thanks for all your interest. And,